The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the worn floral wallpaper in my small living room. At 56, I should have been thinking about early retirement, maybe a little cottage by the sea. Instead, I was staring at a stack of bills, each one a monument to my poor choices, to my unwavering belief in my son, Derek. My name is Rosalind Petrov, but everyone calls me Roz. I've always been a soft touch, especially when it came to Derek. He was my only child, and after his father left when he was just a toddler, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked double shifts at the diner, saved every penny, and made sure he never wanted for anything. That's probably where I went wrong. Derek was always charming, quick with a smile and a story. As he got older, the stories became more elaborate, more desperate. There was the business opportunity that needed just a little seed money, the unexpected medical bills, usually involving a sports car and a lamppost, and the sob stories about landlords and ruthless business partners. Each time, I dipped into my retirement savings, rationalizing that a mother would do anything for her child. The truth is, I enabled him. I wanted to be the hero, the one who always came through. I told myself that one day he'd turn things around, that he'd pay me back, not just financially, but with the love and respect I craved. The reality was far different. The last straw was when he called, his voice choked with emotion, claiming he needed surgery after a particularly nasty accident involving, yes, another sports car. This time, I hesitated. The savings account was almost empty. But the thought of him suffering, I couldn't bear it. I drained the account, every last dollar, and wired it to him. "I'll pay you back, Mom, I promise," he'd said, his voice thick with gratitude. "As soon as I'm back on my feet." Those words echoed in my mind as I hobbled around my apartment, my hip throbbing with pain. I'd tripped on a loose rug, a simple accident that had devastating consequences. I needed surgery, physical therapy, and time to recover. I called Derek, expecting him to be there for me, to finally be the son I always believed he could be. But he didn't answer. Days turned into weeks. My calls went straight to voicemail. I texted, emailed, even contacted his friends. Nothing. Derek had vanished, leaving me alone and broken, both physically and financially. The eviction notice arrived like a final, cruel blow. I was out of options, out of hope. The eviction notice mocked me from the kitchen counter, a stark white rectangle against the faded linoleum. I sat heavily on a rickety chair, the pain in my hip a constant, throbbing reminder of my helplessness. It wasn't just the physical pain, it was the aching emptiness in my heart, the bitter taste of betrayal. Derek's sob stories, as I called them now, had become a well-worn script. Each one followed a predictable pattern. First, the promising venture, a new tech startup, a revolutionary app, a can't-miss real estate deal. He'd paint a picture of immense success, of a future where he'd be able to shower me with the riches I deserved. Then, inevitably, would come the setback, a crucial investor pulling out, a lawsuit from a disgruntled partner, a sudden market crash. And then, the plea. Just a small loan, Mom, to tide me over. Just enough to get back on my feet. I'll pay you back double, triple, as soon as things turn around. The sports car crashes were a particular low point. Derek had always had a need for speed, a reckless streak that worried me sick. The first accident, he'd claimed, was unavoidable, a deer had run out in front of him. The second, a faulty brake. The third, well, by then, I knew better. But each time, there were medical bills, legal fees, and the ever-present threat of losing his license. And each time, I wrote a check, telling myself it was better than seeing him behind bars. Looking back, I can see how easily I was manipulated. He knew my weaknesses, knew how to play on my guilt, my fear, my unwavering love. He knew that I would always choose him, even if it meant sacrificing my own future. The amount he needed always seemed manageable, at least at first. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. I told myself it wasn't that much, that I could always earn it back. I conveniently ignored the mounting credit card debt, the dwindling balance in my savings account. And he was so good at sounding sincere. He'd call me the best mom in the world, shower me with compliments, promise to take me on a cruise as soon as he made it big. I clung to those promises, desperate to believe that my sacrifices would eventually be rewarded. But the cruise never materialized. Instead, there were more calls, more emergencies, more demands on my dwindling resources. And now, here I was, facing eviction, with no savings, no income, and a son who had vanished without a trace. The weight of my choices pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I had given everything to Derek, and in return, he had left me with nothing. Sleep offered little escape. My dreams were filled with flashing headlights, crumpled metal, and Derek's pleading eyes. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the pain in my hip a sharp reminder of my reality. The four walls of my tiny apartment felt like they were closing in on me. The turning point, the moment when everything shifted, wasn't a dramatic explosion or a sudden revelation. It was a quiet, creeping realization that I was utterly, completely alone. The eviction notice was just a piece of paper, but it represented something far more significant: the loss of my home, my security, my future. For days, I stayed inside, paralyzed by fear and shame. I skipped meals, avoided phone calls, and let them settle on every surface. I was ashamed of my situation, ashamed of my son, and ashamed of myself for being so naive. Then, one morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't stay like this. I couldn't let Derek's actions define me. I had to do something, anything, to reclaim my life. It wasn't easy. Getting out of bed was an ordeal. Walking to the bus stop felt like climbing a mountain. But I did it. I put on my best dress, the one I usually saved for special occasions, brushed my hair, and forced myself to smile. My destination was the community center, a small brick building on the edge of town that I'd always vaguely dismissed as a place for bingo and potlucks. I'd never considered it a place for someone like me, someone who'd always prided herself on being independent and self-sufficient. But now, I had no choice. I walked through the front door, my heart pounding in my chest, and asked to speak to someone who could help. A kind-faced woman with silver hair and a warm smile led me to a small office. Her name was Mrs. Nelson, and she listened patiently as I poured out my story, the words tumbling out in a jumbled mess of tears and apologies. I told her about Derek, about the sports cars, about the empty promises. I told her about the retirement savings, the eviction notice, and the throbbing pain in my hip. I told her everything, holding nothing back. When I was finished, Mrs. Nelson didn't offer pity or judgment. She simply nodded and said, "We'll figure something out, Roz. You're not alone." Those words, simple as they were like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Maybe, I wouldn't have to face this alone. Mrs. Nelson's response was more than just kind words, it was a plan of action. Within hours, she'd contacted the local hospital, arranged for a consultation with an orthopedic surgeon, and started the paperwork for emergency assistance. She also connected me with a social worker who helped me navigate the complicated world of government benefits and housing assistance. But the most surprising thing Mrs. Nelson did was suggest a community fundraiser. I balked at first. The idea of parading my misfortunes in front of the whole town filled me with dread. It felt like admitting defeat, like confirming all my worst fears about myself. "Roz," Mrs. Nelson said gently, "you've always been a giver. Now it's time to let others give back to you. People want to help. They just need to know how." She explained that the community center had organized similar fundraisers for other residents in need, and they had been incredibly successful. She assured me that it wasn't about charity, It was about community, about neighbors helping neighbors. Reluctantly, I agreed. Mrs. Nelson and a team of volunteers took charge, creating flyers, contacting local businesses, and setting up an online donation page. They even organized a bake sale and a car wash, all in my name. The day of the fundraiser, I was a nervous wreck. I sat in a chair near the entrance of the community center, watching as people streamed in, their faces filled with concern and compassion. Some were strangers, others were familiar faces from the diner where I used to work. Mrs. Nelson introduced me to everyone, and I did my best to smile and thank them for their support. Many people offered hugs, words of encouragement, and small donations. Some even shared their own stories of hardship and resilience. As the day went on, the atmosphere became more festive. There was music, laughter, and a sense of shared purpose. I watched as children ran around with painted faces, teenagers washed cars with enthusiasm, and elderly women sold homemade cookies with pride. It was overwhelming, humbling, and deeply moving. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged, like I was part of something bigger than myself. The community, it turned out, was my family. The people I'd always taken for granted were now my saviors. And Derek, the son I'd sacrificed everything for, was nowhere to be seen. The fundraiser exceeded all expectations. By the end of the day, we had raised enough money to cover my surgery, physical therapy, and a small, accessible apartment. I was overwhelmed with gratitude, not just for the financial assistance, but for the outpouring of love and support. The surgery was a success. After weeks of physical therapy, I was finally able to walk without pain. My new apartment was small but cozy, with a sunny balcony overlooking a park. It wasn't the cottage by the sea I had once dreamed of, but it was home. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks after the fundraiser, Mrs. Nelson called me with some surprising news. The story of my plight had gone viral. A local newspaper had written an article about the fundraiser, which was then picked up by a national news website. Soon, donations were pouring in from all over the country, from people who had been touched by my story. Mrs. Nelson said, her voice filled with excitement, "You're a celebrity." I laughed, but it was true. My story had resonated with people, particularly women who had experienced similar situations with their own children. I received hundreds of emails and letters, filled with words of sympathy, encouragement, and advice. But the most unexpected consequence of the viral fame was the attention it brought to Derek. Someone recognized him from a photo in the newspaper article and contacted his employer, a prestigious law firm in the city. It turned out that Derek had been living a lie. He had told his employers that he was a successful businessman with a wealthy family. He had even bragged about donating large sums of money to charity. When the law firm learned about his deception, they were furious. They launched an internal investigation and discovered that Derek had been falsifying expense reports and using company resources for personal gain. He was promptly fired. But that wasn't all. The story also reached the ears of Derek's new girlfriend's parents, a wealthy and influential couple who had been impressed by his apparent success. They had even considered investing in his latest business venture. When they learned the truth about Derek, they were appalled. They confronted him, demanded that he return the money they had given him, and forbade their daughter from seeing him again. Suddenly, Derek's carefully constructed world came crashing down around him. His lies were exposed, his job was gone, his reputation was in tatters, and his wealthy girlfriend had dumped him. And it was all thanks to a community fundraiser and a viral news story. It wasn't long before Derek came crawling back. One rainy afternoon, as I was sitting on my sunny balcony, enjoying a cup of tea, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Derek standing there, looking gaunt and disheveled. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his clothes were rumpled. He looked like a ghost of his former self. "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. He shuffled into the apartment, his head hanging low. He sat down on the sofa without waiting for an invitation. "I know I messed up, Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "I know I hurt you. I'm so sorry." I remained silent, watching him carefully. I had heard those words before, countless times. But this time, they sounded different. They sounded genuine. "I lost everything, Mom," he continued. "My job, my girlfriend, my reputation. Everyone knows what I did. No one wants anything to do with me." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with desperation. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I need help." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Anger, resentment, pity, and yes, even a flicker of love. He was still my son, after all. "What kind of help do you need, Derek?" I asked, my voice cold. "I need money, Mom," he said, his voice pleading. "I'm broke. I have nowhere to go. I need you to help me get back on my feet." He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message from his landlord, threatening to evict him if he didn't pay the rent immediately. "It's just a small amount, Mom," he said. "Just enough to tide me over until I find a new job." I stared at the text message, my mind racing. This was it. This was the moment of truth. Was I going to fall for his sob story again? Was I going to let him manipulate me one more time? I took a deep breath and made my decision. "I'm not going to give you any money, Derek," I said, my voice firm. His face fell. "But Mom." "I'm not going to enable you anymore," I continued. "I'm not going to bail you out of your problems. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." He started to argue, to plead, to beg. But I held my ground. I had finally learned my lesson. I had finally realized that true love wasn't about sacrificing myself for someone else, it was about setting boundaries and holding them accountable. "But I'm your son, Mom," he cried, his voice filled with desperation. "Yes, you are my son," I said, "and I will always love you. But I can't help you if you're not willing to help yourself." I stood up and walked over to my computer. "In fact," I said, "I think I know exactly what to do with that money." I logged onto the online donation page for my recovery fund and typed in the amount of Derek's emergency rent. Then, I clicked the donate button. Derek watched in stunned silence as I donated his last plea for help to my own recovery fund. "What are you doing, Mom?" he stammered. "I'm paying it forward, Derek," I said, turning to face him. "I'm using your misfortune to help someone else in need. Maybe, just maybe, it will inspire you to do the same." And with that, I showed him the door. Standing there, watching Derek walk away, a strange sense of peace settled over me. It wasn't happiness, exactly, but it was something close to it. It was the feeling of finally being free, of finally taking control of my own life. The weeks that followed were a time of healing and rediscovery. I spent my days exploring my new neighborhood, making friends at the community center, and volunteering at a local soup kitchen. I even started taking art classes, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time or money for. I learned to paint landscapes, to sculpt with clay, and to express myself in ways I never thought possible. I discovered a hidden talent, a creative spark that had been buried beneath years of worry and sacrifice. And I learned to appreciate the simple things in life, a sunny day, a good book, a friendly conversation. I realized that happiness wasn't about material possessions or external validation, it was about inner peace and meaningful connections. I also started to reconnect with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the years I was focused on Derek. We went out for coffee, shared stories, and laughed until our sides ached. I realized that true friendship was a precious gift, something to be cherished and nurtured. One evening, as I was sitting on my balcony, painting a picture of the sunset, I received a phone call from Mrs. Nelson. Roz, she said, her voice filled with excitement, I have some more good news for you. What is it, Mrs. Nelson? I asked, my curiosity piqued. Remember that money you donated to your recovery fund, she said. Of course, I replied. Why? Well, she said, it turns out that donation caught the attention of a local philanthropist. He was so impressed by your generosity that he decided to match your donation, dollar for dollar. I gasped. You're kidding. I'm not kidding, she said. He wants to meet you and learn more about your story. He's even thinking about starting a foundation to help other women in similar situations. I was speechless. It was like a dream come true. My act of kindness, my decision to pay it forward, had not only helped someone else in need, but it had also inspired someone to do even more good in the world. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but smile. Life, it seemed, had a funny way of working out. Even after all the pain and disappointment, there was still hope, still joy, still the possibility of a happy ending. And it was all thanks to the community that had rallied around me, the friends who had supported me, and the lessons I had learned along the way. My savings may have been drained, but my spirit was full. And that, I realized, was worth more than all the money in the world. Time continued its steady march forward. The foundation that the philanthropist, Mr. Abernathy, started in my name, Roz's Helping Hand, began to assist women escaping similar situations. I became a spokesperson, sharing my story and offering advice to those who felt trapped and hopeless. It was incredibly rewarding to use my experience to help others avoid the pitfalls I had fallen into. One day, I received an unexpected letter. It was postmarked from a city far away, and the return address was unfamiliar. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. The handwriting was shaky and uneven, but I recognized it instantly. It was from Derek. Mom, the letter began, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for what I did. I know I hurt you deeply, and I deserve all the bad things that have happened to me. He went on to describe his struggles. He had been unable to find a new job, and he was living in a homeless shelter. He was battling depression and addiction, and he felt like he had hit rock bottom. I know I don't deserve your help, he wrote, but I'm begging you, Mom. Please don't give up on me. I want to change. I want to be a better person. I want to make you proud. The letter was raw and honest, filled with remorse and regret. It was a far cry from the charming, manipulative Derek I had known for so many years. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read his words. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for him. He was still my son, and I couldn't bear the thought of him suffering. I sat there for a long time, weighing my options. Should I ignore his plea, dismiss him as a lost cause? Or should I give him another chance, risk being hurt again? I decided to talk to Mrs. Nelson. She had always been a wise and compassionate friend, and I valued her opinion. I read her the letter, and she listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. Roz, she said, when I was finished, this is a difficult decision. Only you can decide what to do. But I think you need to consider a few things. She reminded me of Derek's past behavior, of the years of manipulation and deception. She cautioned me against enabling him again, against falling into the same old patterns. But, she added, I also believe in second chances. People can change, Roz. And sometimes, all they need is a little help to get back on their feet. She suggested that I contact a local drug rehabilitation center and inquire about their programs. She offered to help me research resources for homeless individuals and those struggling with addiction. Don't give him money, Roz, she said. But give him the tools he needs to help himself. I took her advice to heart. I contacted the rehabilitation center and learned about their inpatient program, which offered counseling, therapy, and job training. I also gathered information about shelters, food banks, and support groups in Derek's area. Then, I wrote Derek a letter. I told him that I had read his letter and that I was willing to help him, but only if he was willing to help himself. I told him that I wouldn't give him any money, but I would provide him with the resources he needed to get clean and sober. I included the information about the rehabilitation center, the shelters, and the support groups. I told him that I loved him and that I believed in him, but that he had to take the first step. I mailed the letter, along with a small care package containing toiletries, a warm blanket, and a prepaid phone card. Then, I waited. Weeks turned into months. I didn't hear anything from Derek. I started to wonder if I had made the wrong decision, if he had given up on himself. Then, one day, I received another letter. It was from the rehabilitation center. Dear Ms. Petrov, the letter began, I am writing to inform you that your son, Derek Petrov, has successfully completed our inpatient program. I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. The letter went on to describe Derek's progress. He had been a model patient, attending all his therapy sessions, participating in group activities, and working hard to overcome his addiction. He had even secured a job at a local restaurant and was saving money to rent his own apartment. Derek is a changed man, the letter concluded. He is grateful for your support, and he is determined to make a new life for himself. I burst into tears, tears of joy and relief. Derek had done it. He had finally turned his life around. A few weeks later, I received a phone call. It was Derek. Mom, he said, his voice strong and clear, I wanted to thank you for everything. I know I put you through hell, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you for everything you've done for me. You don't have to repay me, Derek, I said, my voice choked with emotion. Just stay on the right path. That's all I ask. He told me about his job, his apartment, and his new friends. He said that he was finally starting to feel like he had a purpose in life. I want to come visit you, Mom, he said. I want to show you how much I've changed. I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. A few weeks later, Derek arrived at my apartment. He looked different, healthier, and happier than I had seen him in years. He was clean-shaven, dressed neatly, and his eyes sparkled with newfound hope. We spent the day together, talking, laughing, and reminiscing. He apologized for all the pain he had caused me, and I forgave him wholeheartedly. I realized that true forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about accepting it and moving forward. Derek's visit was a turning point in our relationship. We started to communicate regularly, sharing our joys and sorrows, our hopes and fears. He became a responsible, caring son, the kind of son I had always dreamed he could be. He even started volunteering at Rosa's Helping Hand, using his own experiences to help other women avoid the pitfalls of enabling their loved ones. He became a powerful advocate for addiction recovery, sharing his story at support groups and community events. Looking back on my life, I can see that everything happened for a reason. The pain and suffering I endured, the financial ruin I experienced, the betrayal I felt, all of it led me to where I am today. I learned that true family isn't just about blood ties, it's about love, support, and mutual respect. I learned that community is a powerful force, capable of healing wounds and lifting spirits. And I learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, always the possibility of redemption. My savings may have been drained by my adult son, but my heart is full. I have a new home, a loving community, and a son who has finally found his way. And that, I realize, is a blessing beyond measure. The lesson I learned was invaluable. True community is my family, and sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the deepest pain. The story of my drained savings and my son's redemption became a beacon of hope for many. I often share it at fundraising events for Rosa's Helping Hand, always emphasizing the importance of community and the power of second chances. People often ask me if I regret helping Derek all those years, if I wish I had done things differently. And my answer is always the same, no. I don't regret loving my son, even when he made mistakes. I don't regret sacrificing for him, even when it hurt. Because in the end, it was my love for him that ultimately led him to change. I learned that love isn't always easy. It's not always about giving and giving and giving. Sometimes, it's about setting boundaries, saying no, and holding people accountable. But it's always about believing in the possibility of redemption. And so, I continue to share my story, to inspire others, and to help women find their own strength and resilience. I continue to volunteer at the soup kitchen, to paint landscapes, and to cherish the friendships I have made along the way. I am Rosalind Petrov, and I am a survivor. I am a mother, a friend, and a member of a loving community. My savings may have been drained, but my spirit is full. And that, I realize, is the greatest treasure of all. Rosa's story reminds us that love isn't measured by how much we give up, but by the strength it takes to say enough. She learned too late that endless sacrifice can become its own kind of selfishness, a refusal to let the ones we love face the consequences that might save them. True compassion isn't shielding others from their storms, it's trusting them to learn the weight of rain. The realization that love with boundaries isn't love withheld, it's love that leaves room for redemption. So, what would you do if love asked you not just to give endlessly, but to stand firm, knowing that sometimes, the greatest act of love is to say no and let someone find their own strength?